So within the crocodile specialist group, we do work on this community stuff. So good things come to those who wait. And all people who study crocodiles know this. You do a lot of waiting. Just to follow up on that question, so this is a poster I've developed, and it's been used up in KwaZulu-Natal and a few other places, Botswana, some other countries, just to help people do the outreach in schools and communities. So the scale of the thing, very briefly, crocodiles are very widely distributed across the tropics, as are snakes. So they live in all sensible places, not like here, when the weather's good. So very significant distribution in the Americas. And the next slide, I'll show you Latin America. A lot of species of crocodiles, not all of them that problematic. Some of them very important economically, very important culturally, and of course, make our lives exciting as conservationists. I collect papers, all the papers that are going out on human-croc interactions. There's a croc digest, I call it, for obvious reasons. So normally the person on the back of the crocodile is inside the crocodile, but anyway. There's a resource. So Latin America, huge distribution. We did a survey of this, published with my colleagues in the croc specialist group. We have a really cool bunch of people working on this within our specialist group from right across these regions and collecting data. So Brandon Sidlu collects the data for us, and that's just a summary of some clusters. Don't worry about the numbers, they're not relevant. But again, very widely distributed. People don't know. Go to the Caribbean, you could be eaten by a crocodile in the Caribbean, lucky you. So, yeah, I'm not going to dwell on this. This is really just scale. And that's sort of clusters of croc attacks, and really that's just showing, don't worry again about the numbers. You can see up in Florida, Southern Africa, so around the Zambezi River, the Great Lakes of Africa, India, of course, Indonesia, of course, and Northern Australia. So partly that reflects concentrations of crocodile attacks and the big bad crocs that live in those places. It's also a little bit of an artifact of where we've got good data. So data is really a challenge for us, and we're working very hard on that. So Brandon's survey data, the 10 years from 2010 to 20, it's really just mainly useful in terms of who we're dealing with, the usual suspects. Very widely distributed, very large crocodile, saltwater crocodile, porosus. These are the bigger numbers, nothing like snakes. But as also with snakes, there's a lot of collateral damage. Like there's a lot of unreported, there's a lot of lives changed and ruined by these events. Nile crocodile, my friends, second. One thing you'll notice there, much higher fatality rates. Don't know why, possibly because of evolutionary reasons, evolved to catch, to live on megafauna, right? Palustris, so that's mugger crocodile all the way from eastern Iran right across Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Andaman Islands, and then American crocodile, which interestingly barely exists in the USA, but is throughout the Americas, and the old gator. And we've tried to standardize our data collection. We have a whole series of things we collect data on for incidents. So it's ecological data, conditions at the time, it's victim data, crocodile data, and of course the problem is unreliability on size. Unless it's shot and measured, it was always that big. You get down to the dam to catch the monster, and it's a water monitor. So here we go. So the other thing I was going to say is what really is required from this kind of work is compassion. That's compassion for crocodiles, of course, that are routinely killed. And it's compassion for people. And so Vikram, I have permission from all these people who wanted their stories to be told. Very hard for these stories to be told in conservation circles. We're going to publish this stuff, right? The only place I publish this stuff is Frontiers in Psychology. These are the stories that maybe people are just thinking, yeah, you know what, statistics. Vikram has nightmares. He was trying to rescue his water buffalo, and he was grabbed by a couple of muggers. Poor old Ratula had 3 days before I saw him, all bandaged up there. And of course, one of the things that happens to people is it's not even always the bite, it's infections, really nasty infections. If you don't get your antibiotics, If you go down to the local healer, you're going to be in trouble and you're going to lose your arm. Not from the bite, from the infection. A very sad story. These guys, Namibin and Hammond, lost their only daughter just from the pond right next to where they live. It's ruined their lives, and this is years after that I met them. It's not over for them. The incident isn't the end. It's the rest of their life that's changed. You've lost your arm. You can't work. Your husband died. You're now an agricultural laborer to feed your kids. Your life's changed. And with conservationists, we kind of need to deal with this. Instead of just, you come and solve the problem. Was it your fault? Wasn't it? Here's some money. Game over. Media gets your story and moves on. That's not good enough. We need to work with this. He's an amazing guy. He's a Magamitra. He helps people, educates people living safely with crocodiles. A very inspirational person. Kalapin Rana, she's had 9 operations. Maybe you can't see it, but her arm is just metal. She was dragged right across the river by a croc, and her mother-in-law, who's as tough as nails, swam across the river, grabbed her and the crocodile, and pulled them back across. And then some guys came and beat the croc, and the croc said, this is too much work. And young mother, she can't comb her hair anymore. She doesn't swim, not even a swimming pool. Very frightened. So this is stuff we need to deal with. We need to also think about first response to this kind of stuff. You don't want to send a forest department guy. This is trauma. These guys have had something really difficult happen. So we need to think about how we respond to this kind of stuff. And of course the crocs, right? So this is just my friend Louise Bossetti, a colleague in the group, was feeling a bit traumatized by this. This is an extended video with a whole cheering crowd of people in Manakapuru, that's in Amazonas, beating to death at great leisure this croc, this big black caiman. And they're being attracted into cities now. We're seeing much more urban stuff. So there's the famous urban crocs of Vadodara in Gujarat. But we're seeing a lot of this now. Rio, the crocodiles coming now. There's people chuck their rubbish, dogs die. People throw stuff off the bridge. What are we doing? So of course that's the impacts, right? That's the attacks. The conflict is between different sets of people about what we do about the attacks. And I'm not going to go through this. These are the different major categories. So we're trying to figure out what are the main things people do. Risky behavior is an interesting one. It could be traditional belief. People think they're safe. They go to the sacred place where the saint's going to protect them. You might not. Depends if the crocodile's religious. Or they don't know. They don't know the behavior of the crocodile. They go down with their dog at it like that's unintelligent Australian fellow. And of course, Northern Territory, Florida, beer, stupidity. There's a lot of famous last words recorded. And that's Mankainkai, who had a bad donkey habit. Old friend of mine, just thought I'd. Management responses. So we're trying to figure out, we've done big surveys. What are people doing everywhere? What do people think works? So this was from our Latin America survey, and we're really wanting to do one in Africa, so help us. We want to do the same thing. It's a bit mad, but we want to do the whole of Africa with their crocodiles. We want to talk to people. What are people doing? What do they think works? First phase. Second phase, we're going to go and talk hotspot areas. We're going to go and do those qualitative work on the ground. More culture and those kinds of things. So what's effective, what isn't, what's not effective, and of course, in most cases, don't know. And people like silly things like soundboards. Everyone loves soundboards. Sorry, I get emotional about soundboards. You go to a lake in East Africa and you put a sign there that says, danger crocodiles. No shit. People have been living there all their lives and their generations, and there's crocodiles in the lake. No shit. I'm sorry, put it in the tourist areas. That's fine. But really enough of the soundboards. So finally, really, the big thing is that it's not always translatable, right? Some of the stuff just doesn't work in other places. It might be ecological, the habits of the crocodile, institutions, capacity, and cultural reasons. And that can be surprising things. Like, we really kind of stalled a bit with our croc manual because we wanted to talk about, wanted a section on capture, securing, and transporting and releasing. Boy, did we run into arguments about this. So the North Americans, it's cruel to trap crocodiles because then they lie there. Poor old crocs, in the sun, whatever, and I get it, it's not nice for the crocodile. But, if you're in a certain lake zone in Zimbabwe, or you're in a part of Indonesia, remote part of Indonesia. Sorry, I'm just going to try and sequence myself here. You can't send my friend Alligator Rob out with his catching pole to catch your old gator on the golf course. It's just not like that. So, there are some real differences. East Timor, certain crocodiles are bad. They can be caught and taken. Other crocodiles are ancestor crocodiles. You may not interfere with them. Other crocodiles are messenger crocodiles. They've been sent to bite that person for a reason, and they had it coming. And you can't mess with those crocodiles. So for managers, this is complicated, right? You can't just give people the manual and say, right, under these circumstances, lethal control. It's not appropriate. India, lethal control, it's not appropriate, right? My last comment here is that in my experience in our group, the advice is better presented as recommendations and resources. These are things that we've tried that might work. People don't like to be told best practice. This is the way you do it. And they don't like standards. So I don't want to be the croc guy who says, this is the way we do crocs. It's a mistake and it's annoying and people aren't going to use it. And also, I'm not going to learn stuff. So that's what I wanted to say. Is it? Oh, wait a minute. They're complicated. That was just very quickly to illustrate the cultural points. There's all this diversity of different relationships people have. And one example in India is Kodia. So she is always shown, she's a Hindu sort of warrior goddess, always shown on the back of a crocodile. Some of the victims I spoke to had this on their houses. That's from a house. And they all said, oh yeah, sure, we don't want anything to happen to the croc because Kodia. Other people also had this on their house. And they said, oh no, there's no relationship with actual crocs. So you've got to be careful when conservationists love these culture stories that they think are going to be useful for them. Yeah, okay, they might not. So you need to be a little bit more nuanced. This place, they haven't had any crocs because of the same. And any croc attacks, Malataj and their pond, they're famous for their crocs. Because of this guy, because he told the crocs off. They ate one of his cows or whatever it was hundreds of years ago. And he went down to the lake and instructed the crocodiles and all their relatives, they shall never do this again. And according to the villagers, never happened. So that's a worry. But the crocodiles and the people in many of these parts of Gujarat somehow seem to get along. But people are also being careful. I won't say anything about the old boy. He finally got chopped. He stood on chef de cabinet, and that was the end of him. So I'm just going to finish by saying, what do we want then? Are we focused on this as a problem? What do we want? I've written this paper with Saloni and Anna Rybasova, where we talk about coexistence and what does that look like. It's really hard to measure because usually it's about people not doing things. It's easy to do attacks. You can count it. What about when people don't do things, like when the croc doesn't attack someone? Well, these guys have built an island out in the middle of their pond, so the crocs can go and bask there safely, and people can walk around the edge and not be bothered. It's really smart, really simple. And that's a nice one, because I can measure it. So please tell me about more of those ones that I can think, oh yeah, right, that's coexistence. I won't go into this really, but I've written a paper on compassion, and it's really about this idea that, well, how do we get to coexistence? I've got some good friends, Silvio Marcini is working out some actual methods of getting us there. So, planning and adaptive management. But kind of more philosophically, there's this idea of human capabilities. Amartya Sen's worked on this, well-being, what do people need? And I'm just wondering whether you can take that kind of thing and enlarge the ethical circle to include animals and the significant ones who are interested, and whether you could, what might it look like for a species to flourish? What sort of capabilities does it have? What is its territory? Where does it go at night? Is it a reptile? What does it do when it's cold? Can we factor this kind of stuff into our thinking? And can we talk then with people in those communities about what might be necessary for us all to get along in our landscape? Yeah, and that definitely is it. Sorry, that is the end. The end. So I think, yeah, question.
Simon, thank you always for a very entertaining and interesting talk. Would you mind going back? Sorry, you just pulled it up. Would you mind going back to one of your first slides, the kind of frequency map of all the different fatal and non-fatal attacks?
There's always that guy. Hang on, which one was it?
I think it's that one.
That one.
Not being a croc guy, would you mind kind of giving some more context to the variation in why some of these attacks are happening? So thinking about Florida, for instance, I don't think these are, correct me if I'm wrong, but these people whose kids just walk outside into their front yard, or are these people who are going into the Everglades and actually getting, are there differences in the reasons why people are getting attacked from one location to the next?
Yeah, and it's a good question. The demographics are also really different. So in regions of Africa where I work, it's a lot of kids, more kids, and particularly boys, teenage boys, risky behavior, swimming in the rivers. In Gujarat, surprisingly, it wasn't, or it was surprising to me, it's mostly adults and it's men who are doing those jobs in the landscapes that are exposing. I thought it would be more women. The things that people are doing are very different. So most African women in my region are doing domestic chores, washing, fetching water, those sorts of things. Most of the guys are swimming, fishing, crossing the river. So quite different demographics. And that's really important for outreach. You want to know who you need to talk to and what sorts of things you need to be talking to them about. Florida, it's actually, most of the stuff is like, I don't know if you guys saw the story, but this guy literally felt a banging on his door, opened the door, and a gator bit him. It's like, well, hello. So my friend, Alligator Rob, most of the crocs he's finding are in someone's garage, in a golf course. You know, it's that kind of thing. That kid who was taken in the Disney World down at the edge of the water. And it's a little dim as well because people need to understand they're in gator territory. Florida, it's gator territory. If there's water, chances are there might be a gator in it. So it is quite different, and our messaging, therefore, to people is quite different. Like, you'll get people going out to Sri Lanka, and it never occurred to them that there might be crocodiles in salt water. So they think they're perfectly safe. Yeah. Any other questions? Right at the back? Oh, there. There. We'll take two, one there and then one there. And then
Thank you very much for the presentation. I can see still on there that the Crocodilians niloticus is the highest fertile. Is it because of the distribution or because of their population is it high population or their distribution?
Very good question. This is why we want to do this survey. So it's very widely distributed, that's true. What we're not sure on, though, is what's happening to those populations within that distribution. So it's regarded as common because of the distribution. What we don't really know is the abundance of some of those populations anymore. There are concentrations of crocodiles, Kariba, parts of the Zambezi, parts of Mozambique. We know there's lots of crocodiles. Murchison Falls, famous for crocodiles. Within South Africa, Kruger National Park used to be famous for it, but there's lots of die-offs due to pollution, and all sorts of things are going on that are changing. So it's quite hard to say. So we want to identify where are the concentrations of crocodiles, and is it the case that where there are lots of crocs, there are lots of problems? It depends what people are doing, it depends where people are living, but in some cases, yes, there are.
And also for the different species of the crocodiles, do you have any estimate of the numbers to say the Crocodilians niloticus, there are so many approximately within certain, or total
number of Nile crocodiles?
Yeah, of different species.
Yeah, I can definitively say we haven't a clue. We don't know, honestly. So I've just had a student look at all the surveys that we've collected, and we are all the historical surveys, and it's super patchy, and this is what we're trying to work on right now. I mean, in some ways for our work, we don't need to know on attacks how many there are, but of course it's what we're trying to do. So Matt Shirley and my colleagues are just finishing the Crocodiles survey. They've split off sort of Central and West African crocodiles actually are a different species to Niloticus. And we're just busy finishing, so we'll have quite good distribution for them. But for Niloticus, there are big areas. Like those lazy-ass canyons, they're not telling us anything about how many crocodiles they got.
Contribute to economic value within the...
Oh yeah, no, big time, big time. I'll talk about that a bit more in the general session, but thank you.
Right, thank you.
There's one question in the back. Yes, important in Zimbabwe.
This one might be quick. Thank you very much for that presentation. I really love the focus on compassion for people. And so with that in mind, do you think that the conservation field, maybe not necessarily the research, but the practice, should be looking to engage specialists in dealing with trauma, dealing with...
Thank you.
I mean, bear attacks, right? So we deal with that just recently, in fact. And so I'm curious on your thoughts.
No, so that's really what I'm motivating for, but it's a challenge because, so compassion is important and having people skilled, but it needs to be appropriate to the region. So yes, we have the DSM-5, we have a lot of skill on PTSD, which is what we're dealing with here, often. But it's really Western model stuff. So one of the things we need to be doing is, like you guys are doing, is to be working with local healers. And I mean, something really interesting happened in South Africa with AIDS and HIV and AIDS, because we had a really unhelpful president at the time who said this is an invention and a Western story. And actually what needed to happen and did was the traditional healer organization got together with doctors and said, look, these guys need retrovirals for that. But for the trauma and the difficulty and the depression, all of that, they need to talk to us. And they worked this out. That's how it worked. So you need both of those things covered. What you don't need is a forestry department guy with big boots on coming down and saying, and someone's just had their arm chewed off and their son's been swallowed and their uncle's been sat on. And it's like, okay, what were you doing at the time? Was it your fault? Not helpful. And not helpful for the conservation relationship with the community. So it's a challenge, but we need people skilled. And I would love to see, there's masses on sexual violence, PTSD-related sexual violence, and armed conflict. And good luck finding the stuff for animals. Good luck. So please, I would encourage everyone to say that.